Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Well, whether you want to believe it or not, you have two minds. You might think it's only here, but there's, call it a sub-mind within there. I actually think there's three minds. I think your stomach has a mind of its own a lot of times. It just does what it wants. We're going to talk about that and how to harness the power of your two minds and how it could be holding you back from moving your life forward. She's a life coach, a hypnotherapist, NLP practitioner, cancer survivor, and she's back with us with all the insight. Dawn Torkelson joins us on the program. Hey, Dawn, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, good to have you back here. And last time we learned a lot about the subconscious, and we're going to go a little bit deeper into that today because it is so impactful, so powerful, and basically driving us. Do I have that, like the stat right, that it's like 90%, if not more, of our daily activities, everything we do is our subconscious literally driving, and call it maybe 10% is actually your conscious mind doing it. Is that, you think that's right?
No, yes, that's very right. Yeah, most things that we do are actually a habit or a learned behavior that we've done before. And most thoughts that we have that lead to that behavior are thoughts that we've had in the past. So we spend more of our time literally thinking in the past than we consciously do thinking, in the moment. And that's why a lot of times something happens and then people react because they're reacting with a thought or a memory of the past.
Do we do that because we want to stay safe, and by thinking about the past, it's more comfortable?
That might be part of it. Or the other part might be, after you've already done something, you kind of have a neural pathway in the brain where that you've made, because every thought creates like these new pathways. So if you it's kind of like being on a railroad track. You get on the train and you just stay on that same track. Well, if you wanted to switch tracks, you have to literally switch the thought. You have to, make a conscious effort to change that. So that's how you're kind of getting them working together. And then you make a new pattern, and then you'll start following that new one.
How tough? Yeah. How do you rewire? Like, how long does it take to rewire or change tracks?
Well, you could have a new thought or create a new track. So every time you think of something, you can create a new one. Now, whether you stay on it or not, that's where the effort comes in. That's where you want to maybe journal or let's say you have a new goal, right? Or something you want to do. That's when you start thinking about that new goal and you start thinking about the outcome of that goal and you focus on that new track. If you start thinking about everything that's going to go wrong with this new goal, you're kind of falling back into an old track, of, oh, it's not going to work out. What ifs, blah, blah, blah. So you kind of have to decide how you want to point that train and what destination it's going to go to. And the more you do that, then it becomes the habit.
I never considered or realized that doing things like journaling, just being more mindful is the thing that kind of cements the new programming, the new track that you're on. So that's it's so easy, but I never realized that.
Right. And it almost seems like it's too easy to work. And people think, oh, it can't be that easy, because everyone thinks a problem has to have a hard solution.
Right.
And that's just not true. In fact, we create the problems and we create the hard solutions. We make it so complicated. We overthink everything. We don't, people, I've spoken, to some people who are like, well, it's my emotions, it just makes me sad. Like this just breaks my heart or whatever. And I'm like, but what is the thought you have right before that emotion? Because the emotion doesn't come first. The thought does. But people don't realize that. They don't realize, maybe something happened and maybe it reminded you of something. Like maybe you go to a restaurant and you see this little baby and it's just like being happy and playing, and you kind of laugh, and it reminds you of, oh, my granddaughter, or oh, my daughter, or my son, or whatever, it reminds you of a different time. So that's why you enjoyed, seeing that baby. If a baby was crying, same thing. You might be like, oh, I remember when my kid did that, right?
Yep.
So you have the emotion based off the thought.
And the reverse of that too is if you go into a situation, let's say you're in a bad relationship, ended bad, right? And you're driving down the road and you see a restaurant and you remember, oh, I remember we celebrated our anniversary there. And that could be a negative emotion at that moment, but you had the thought. You thought it before you felt the emotion. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, and that actually explains on a layman level things like depression, because you think that thought, like you said, you go by the restaurant, you're like, oh, that reminded me of so and so. We used to have so much fun there. And then you continue on that path. You think of the next thought. Oh, I remember when we did this. Oh, I remember. Oh, well, why aren't we doing that anymore? Oh, yeah, I remember why, because this person, and it just takes you down like the wrong path where your thought started out like sweet, like, oh, I remember this. And then pretty soon, bam, you remember why you're not together. But you can also change that. Like when you recognize that path coming, you could be like, oh yeah, I remember that restaurant. And then you could think of maybe something else that you liked instead of letting it go to the negative. But
like, even for example, instead of thinking about that person, again, I'm assuming it didn't end well, you could think, they had really good skirt steak. It was really good there. Yeah. And just forget about the relationship end of it. Because once you start thinking of the relationship end or that situation, like you just said, Dawn, things start swirling. Well, she was cheating at one point. I wonder if she and he went there. All those different things, just which probably aren't true, but once you start, all that stuff comes in. It's I learned, I don't know if I shared this with you, but it's just what you're saying about the past and depression. Not that I had depression, but somebody said to me in my journey just over 2 years ago, why don't you live in the now? Why don't you live in the present?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I don't know. What do you mean? No, you don't live now. And it took me some time to realize it. And then I thought, I live in the past, could be depression, negative, or the future, which leads to anxiety because you're anticipating something probably is not going to take place anyway. If you live in the now, right here, right now, no issues. How can there be an issue?
Yeah, because the only thing that's happening right now is what you're choosing. So it gives you the most power. The most power you have is right here in the now.
Yeah.
Because like right now, I choose how I want to feel. I choose what I'm going to say and do.
Yep.
I'm not being affected by the past or by the future.
Right.
Because I'm not thinking of either.
And you can't control the past. It already happened. And you can't control the future. It didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. So that's even more reason that you don't need to have anxiety, because anxiety is fear of the unknown. Well, if you know that you control that known, how can you be afraid of it?
Right.
Right?
You can control the next 5 seconds if you want to look to the future, if you want to call it that, or, call it an hour. I'm going to get a cup of coffee, in a half hour, whatever. And then you can stop right there. How do you, when you work with somebody on the life coaching level, do you often do hypnotherapy? Do you mix that in, or it really kind of depends?
Yeah, I'll mix it in. I mix it in actually on quite a few levels. Some people want like an hour, where they just do straight, hypnosis, and we can do like a whole hypnosis session. And then other times, I use hypnotic language to work with the subconscious mind just during our coaching, just during our conversation. So,
and I'm intrigued. Can you tell me a little bit about the hypnotic language? And is that an NLP? Are we in the same zone here? Okay.
Yeah. So NLP is really using language to influence. And it's really understanding how language influences other people as well. So, for example, if there's let me think, I'm trying to think of something that just happened, because I work with a community center, and right now we're putting together, me and my partner, a program on, it's actually geared towards like sex trafficking. It's called Community Heal, but we started with a class on internet safety, and then the next one was being confident. And one of the things that we talked about was the words you say to yourself, and being, and saying nice things. And one of the kids got sad, and he was saying, that he doesn't really feel like people say nice things to him. So one of the things I said, they were supposed to write down a couple of things that they liked about themselves, and he was getting frustrated with this challenge. And so what I said to him was, well, I wonder, you know, I wonder if you could think of something that you like about yourself. Or, and then after that, I kind of said to him, I know you don't know, but if you did know, what would be something you liked? And he told me something he liked. And what happened was, instead of putting the pressure on him of trying to remember something, which in his conscious mind, he wasn't pulling it from, I got him to remember it from the subconscious mind, where because the subconscious mind, it works on emotion, but it also likes to give you answers. So when I took out the pressure and I said, I know you don't know, but if you did know, I wonder, what do you think it would be? Something popped up, and he told me, and then he felt better. So it kind of changed his emotional state as well.
Hmm. Did that come from his subconscious when that
Well,
popped up?
yeah, yes.
Hmm. And by the
Yeah.
way, just side note, complete uh, digression here, but the sex trafficking thing, I worked with an organization about a year and a half ago. Um, it is so prevalent and so not what many people think. And I just all I'm going to say is like people think that it originates or happens seedy hotels and think no, it's not. And actually, I was working with a hotel that was owned by, and it's a chain, but they own the local franchise connected to another business that it was connected to, and they had all that's why they were doing it, just to spread awareness. It's everything you don't realize that's going on. So
Oh
you
yeah.
thank you for doing that. It's
Oh yeah, it's
yeah,
fun.
yeah.
I'm enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would. It's actually our pilot program. So
Wow.
we're working with someone who's agreed to let us do this and give us a lot of feedback so we can improve it and take it out to a
Awesome.
further market. But yeah.
So you mentioned before, Dawn, might have been before we jumped on today, about exercises or precursors you can do.
Mhm.
What are they?
Oh yeah, we were talking about like if somebody wanted to work with me, but they didn't really understand how to connect with their unconscious mind, or they were putting a lot
Exactly.
of pressure on themselves, or they're like, I don't think I can do this, or I don't understand this.
Right.
Um, yeah, what one that I like to do, and I think a lot of hypnotherapists use it, it's kind of common, is I like to ask someone to like close their eyes and just to imagine that they're walking in this beautiful park, and that they can smell like citrus scents around them, and that there's a really big tree in front of them, and they're walking towards this tree. And when they get to this tree, there's a little bench. So they sit down on this bench and they look up and they notice that they're sitting underneath a lemon tree. And they reach up and they grab this beautiful, big, fat lemon off the tree. And they're smelling it, and they're feeling the rind of it, and they're holding this lemon, and they take out a little knife, and or they peel it, and they cut this lemon, they take a bite. And I asked them to just kind of imagine, what does it smell like? Is it citrusy? It's fresh. They take a bite and it's just cool and it's refreshing, and it's a little sweet and a little tart. And and they're sucking on that juice, and they're just really enjoying this little relaxation with this lemon. And then I asked them afterwards, what happened? Like, what did you notice with your body when you were experiencing, this lemon? And usually they're like, oh, I'll ask them, did you notice any saliva? Did you swallow? Did you lick your lips? Could you smell that lemony scent, that citrus scent? Did you notice a breeze in the air? Like, what did you notice with this scenario?
I have a feeling I know where this is going, but keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. And they'll tell me everything that they experience. And I'll ask them, so are you really holding a lemon? And they're like, no. And I'm like, did your body respond like you were eating a lemon? And they'll be like, yeah. And I'm like, that's the power of your subconscious mind. That's the power of you telling it you're doing something, and it's responding to what you're telling it.
And I'm not the expert, but if we were to look at that lemon as something that triggered us or was a trauma, if we didn't experience that lemon before, how would we know? How would we know what it smells like? How would we know that it's tart? How would we know it's a little sweet? How do we know it's juicy? We wouldn't know because it was already printed in our subconscious. So what I'm saying is that if that is a trauma, something that happened in your past could have been a comment that somebody passed on to you when you're 5 years old, and now it's stuck. Now it's limiting you. It keeps coming up like the lemon,
right?
Because it happened, and you might not, remember it, and you might not have even remembered, maybe you had one lemon in your entire life and you were 9 years old, and if you thought back to it, you could do that exercise and like, yeah, it's right in my hand. But
right.
If you didn't do it, you wouldn't be able to react to it. That lemon could be a baseball, could make no difference to you, but it was something
Right.
that's in your subconscious, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. If someone's never had a lemon, we'd use something else. Or let's say, like, going on your analogy. So something negative in the past happened. It triggered something. They were remembering it, but they don't want to remember that lemon, right? They don't want to. So we could do the same technique, and we could change that experience of the lemon. Like, they're like, oh, this lemon was tasted horrible. I didn't like
Mm,
it. And I'd be like, all right, so what do you want? What would you want instead? And maybe they'll say, I want a peach. And I'm like, okay. So now we're going to change that lemon into a peach, something that you do want, something that brings you a happy memory, something that, so maybe instead of the lemon being aggressive or mean to you, now you have this beautiful peach that tells you how wonderful you are, and that you can relate to, and that, will make you happy. So now when you think back to the peach, you'll get a happy feeling versus the negative feeling.
totally
So
got it.
yeah, so that's kind of how, when you work with trauma and you're getting rid of trauma, you kind of use that kind of situation. So, like, if someone's like, oh, well, when I was a kid, I was beat up every day or whatever, right? We could go back, and we could I would have them figure out what they learned from that, you know. So, what did you learn from this emotion? What did you learn from this experience? And we do that by having you look down on that experience, being disassociated, but kind of replaying it.
But literally, and I don't mean to cut you off, but just to illustrate it,
Yeah.
I did a timeline regression where I went back to negative emotions, and I was above it in my mind, eyes closed, looking down on it. Oh yeah, I was 5 years old and I remember seeing it. And if I wasn't getting clarity on it, then I would be told by the practitioner, all right, well, back off a little bit, go a little bit higher. So now you're really seeing it down there. Is that kind of what you mean when you're above it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's actually pretty much exactly what I mean.
Okay.
And that way you get a different perspective. You get a bird's eye view. And, for example, if just any bird's eye view, if you're a parent and you see your two kids fighting, you're looking at them like, this is silly, they're arguing over something ridiculous. and you're kind of waiting for them to figure it out. And if they don't, you intervene, it's kind of like that. It's like you take the person, you take the child from their perception, their perspective of this little argument, and you expand it so you're more like the parent looking down on it, so that they can realize, oh, did I really need to argue about that? Like, that's silly,
Right.
Yeah.
So the lemon, my lemon is scallops. I don't eat, I'm serious. I don't eat seafood.
Okay.
Every once in a while I have fried calamari. That's about it. And that's only in like the last year, too. Why? Because I had a bad food poisoning experience when I was 24 with scallops. And I was just like, nah, I don't need seafood. I'm good. I don't need to do that anymore. So I'll
Right.
bet you if I change the scallops into something else nice, like, chocolate shake or whatever, I
There
probably, right?
there is actually a technique which is very similar to what you were just describing, where, like, if somebody wants to quit smoking, you actually do an association where you associate what they like about smoking to something that they dislike. So I worked with someone and they hated the smell of cigars, hated it, but they were a smoker, which I didn't really understand, because you'd think if you dislike smoke, you'd dislike smoke, all of it, but no. So I we we did a technique where every time she thought about cigarettes, she would kind of like the lemon. Instead of tasting the lemon, she would smell and taste cigar smoke. Every time she'd put a cigarette towards her mouth, it would, for her, we switched it so it would taste like a cigar, and she didn't like it. So it's kind of changing the pattern, changing the pattern from something that you think you like to something you dislike.
Do you have to be under hypnosis to do that substitution one for the other?
Well, it is a hypnotic technique.
Okay.
When you say you have to be under hypnosis, I mean, hypnosis is really being in a very relaxed state. It's using high alpha and theta waves, which are two brain waves that are very natural, that we use all the time. Kids are in high alpha and theta probably till about 7, when they start learning logic. The brain doesn't even develop logic before then.
Which is why that it's so impactful when you're from birth to 7.
Yep.
You're a clean slate.
Yep. Which actually goes directly to one of the things I wanted to talk about today. What is the purpose of the subconscious mind? And so when you're working with the subconscious mind and you're using these natural brain waves, the subconscious mind, what it's there for, excuse me, is to store memories and to make associations. It organizes your memories, and it will repress any memories that need a solution. So this is why things might come up later in life. It actually runs the body. Its whole job is to preserve the body. This is why you have fight or flight, and this is why you have your survival mode and all that.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's domain of the emotions. This is where it houses your emotions and your thoughts. But it's a highly moral being. This is where you get your gut instincts, like when you know something's not right, but you question it and you do it anyway, and then you get a bad outcome, or you do something. It's because you have that moral being inside you to begin with. And that's kind of trying to lead and guide you, but it also enjoys serving you. So you give it a command and it's going to follow it. And because it doesn't have a concept of time or space, it doesn't always know if that command is really the best command for you, if it's serving you as it should.
And it's also, it can't, we're just about out of time.
Oh, okay.
I always want to keep going.
I know, right?
Isn't it? It knows no time and space. So therefore, if you're confronted with a situation now, that situation when you were 6 years old, in your subconscious is now,
Yeah.
is now. And if you say things to yourself in a certain way, like, oh, I'll never make money. I'm never gonna be able to buy that car. It's gonna say, it's listening and saying, it doesn't know, never. It just says, oh, don't buy a car. Oh, don't make money.
Exactly. It'll
And
be
then,
like, okay.
yeah,
It's like, okay.
and
And then
it'll
when you,
derail you and you won't even know, well, yeah, I didn't get that job. I don't know what happened because you probably sucked at the job interview because your subconscious did it for you because that's what you asked for.
exactly. Yeah, because it takes everything personally,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, so I'm actually in the process right now of writing, well, getting edited this book that I've been working on. And it's all about healing and how important mindset is for healing, whether it's physical or mental or, emotional, whatever. And so it'll probably come out towards the end of the year, but it's called Healing the Body and Nurturing the Soul. And it's my journey from dis-ease to ease
Yeah.
and how
And,
you
and
maneuver through everything.
and we talked about that last time we got together. And if you missed it, look back in episodes because that was a crazy situation for you, but a good situation in that all the stuff that we're talking about, all the stuff that you teach and help people do, you were doing it. Then we're confronted with cancer.
Yeah.
And it's your belief that you got through that and some pretty challenging moments there because of your understanding of the subconscious and how to heal in all different ways, right?
Oh, exactly. Like how I from day one, how I worked through this whole, from my spinal surgery to facing the diagnosis and everything, like kind of like a warrior champ because I set my mind right,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah.
It's almost as if, somebody needs surgery and the doctor says, well, they're in really good shape. So they'll recover even faster.
Right.
You mentally and physically, but more mentally too, you were prepared. You didn't know you were preparing yourself for those challenges, but you already had the preparation.
Right. Versus if a doctor tells someone, hey, you're in bad shape, you have 6 months to live, a high majority of people die within that time frame because that's all they focus on. And they're like, oh, okay, this is all the time I have left. So
Yep.
everything they do is based on doing it within this timeline, where I think that's a horrible thing. I don't think any doctor should ever tell somebody that. I mean, it's one thing because I understand the importance of being prepared and telling people, hey, what this is statistically what it is. But I also think that kind of ruins your mental focus
Yeah.
from focusing on, okay, I have 6 months to figure out how do I get another 6 months? How do I get rid of this all completely? How do I do something else?
That's so true. Yeah. Even the actor Jeremy Renner, I don't know if you remember his
Yeah,
accident on New Year's Day where he got run over by a massive snow moving machine and
it's crazy.
broke so many bones in his body, literally broke his face, everything. I mean, he's got an artificial leg and all of that. I mean, just, it banged him up like in a way you can't even imagine. And just the other day, well, this week, on Instagram, he was at Disney with his family.
I know, it's amazing. Like
Not even for barely 4 months.
yeah,
Why? Because he said, I'm not letting this take me down. I'm going. I'm going. It's not going to be easy, but I'm going to move forward with it
yeah.
in the mindset.
And that's amazing healing,
Yeah.
like 4 months, that's fast.
Yeah. And not to say, he doesn't have challenges, but to get to that point, if we looked at other people, they'd be still in the hospital bed or just barely getting it out of it at that point.
Right.
Your website, Advanced Life Coaching or
Yeah,
Coach?
advancedlifecoaching.org. And they can also email me at positivenlp@gmail.com.
Thank you for today. Thank you for explaining everything. And you have such a great way of doing it. So it's clear, it's understandable, and like
Okay.
super relatable. I mean, right back to the lemon thing. It was like totally you get it, and that's why, why our subconscious does that, allows us to experience good and bad. So again, thank you so much. I look forward next time we get together, Dawn.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I look forward to it as well.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.